Item 10B, approve a response to the grand jury report, which is the San Mateo County Special Districts, who is really in charge of the taxpayers' money, the Mosquito District Embezzlement.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the City Council. As you know, the grand jury from time to time identifies topics and issues that they take under investigation, and they render findings and conclusions that they will disseminate to responsible agencies throughout our county for a required response. That is the case in this situation where the grand jury has taken up an investigation of the situation primarily prompted by the 2011 discovered embezzlement at the Mosquito and Vector Control District for San Mateo County. As a result, the grand jury has rendered a report with a variety of findings and recommendations. Some of those recommendations directed to cities within the county. As is the requirement of the court, the city, if required to respond, is required to respond to all of the findings and to those recommendations that are directed to its attention, in this case to cities' attention generally. In some cases, the types of issues that the grand jury takes up may be of limited interest when they relate to issues within the county, but not those specifically and directly and immediately related to the city of San Bruno. They may be of sort of a limited or a tangential type of interest to the San Bruno City Council and to the San Bruno community. I think in this particular case, we have a little bit of a different situation in that this topic, largely because of the diligent effort of Mr. Robert Recall, the city's appointed representative to the Mosquito and Vector Control District Board, does carry a little bit more interest. You receive regular reports from Mr. Recall. He has frequently, as needed, brought members of the district staff to discuss current issues with the City Council. And both the district and Mr. Recall provide regular reports, both in writing as well as in other venues other than directly in front of the City Council. For example, information that is provided over our San Bruno Cable Channel 1 and information that is provided to the public via our focused newsletter. So I would say that this particular topic has a little bit more sort of interest for our community and our organization, largely because of what I would again refer to as the diligent effort of your appointed representative. As such, both Mr. Reichel and I'm sorry, I'm trying. And Mr. Gay, the district manager, both took the time to meet with me and to provide me both their opinions, but more importantly, background information that assisted in staff's preparation of this proposed response to the grand jury. So what you have in front of you tonight is both a cover letter as well as a detailed response to each of the findings in the grand jury's report and the two recommendations that are directed to the attention of cities in our county. I'll summarize just very briefly in a very high-level overview the content of that proposed response. In short summary, staff is recommending that the city's response agree for the most part with the findings of the grand jury with a couple of specific exceptions. And I'll come back to those in a moment. And that the City Council identify that the two recommendations to which you are required to respond as to your adoption of those recommendations, your actual action to implement them, that in fact the city has either already implemented the recommendation or is prepared, or staff is recommending that you be prepared via this response to implement the other recommendation should there be a situation in the future where that is called for. So I'll come back to that in just a second. As for the findings in this grand jury report, many of them, as I indicated before, relate directly and specifically to issues that arise out of the very, very unfortunate and obviously very concerning situation where hundreds of thousands of dollars were embezzled from the district in a situation that was uncovered in 2011. The grand jury, of course, addresses itself to many of the specifics of the issues that led up to the embezzlement situation, as well as activities and issues that have occurred since that time in the district's response. In general, staff recommends that you, wise, I guess I would say, that you agree with the basic findings that embezzlement happened. It resulted from a variety of deficiencies in the internal controls, reporting, and other issues within the district, and that situation really can't be ignored, and it is one of, should be one of extreme concern both to this community as well as to all others in our county. At the same time, the grand jury has, in its report, stepped a bit beyond those findings as it does and concluded that there is a imperative or proposed reconsideration of dissolution of the district and transfer of the functions of the district to the County Environmental Health Department as a proposed solution, if you will, to the situation that, that previously occurred. Staff is recommending that your response take a little bit of a different position. And again, I'll say one more time, based largely on our specific experience with the district, with its services, the quality of those services, the level of time and attention that have been devoted to the protection of health and the effectiveness of those services within our county. And then very specifically, much of this recommendation is based on the similarly good service that this community receives from its appointed representative, who takes very seriously his responsibility both to be accountable for any lack of attention that might have contributed to the embezzlement situation, but also very importantly to his responsibilities as an appointed representative to a district that provides an important service within our county. And as such, staff is recommending that your response to the grand jury does not agree 100%, but agrees in part with many of the with many of the findings that the grand jury has made as to specifics related to the embezzlement and to the current situation of the district, and that your response disagree with the findings that suggest the dissolution of the district and the transfer of its responsibilities to the county. The primary reason for that recommendation that you're receiving tonight is beyond the comments that I've repeated several times already about the good service that staff recommends that this community has received, that in fact there is no information in the grand jury report that addresses itself specifically to how or why you and this community should expect that better service, better attention, better use of the taxpayers' money might result from transfer and absorption of the district's current responsibilities into an already busy department of the county government. Staff is not recommending to you that that wouldn't be a good situation or a potentially workable situation. Staff is recommending that after review of this information, our conclusion is that such dramatic or drastic change in the district's operation may not and staff recommends is not warranted to address the current situation, primarily because staff's review demonstrates that, in fact, the district, having undergone a startlingly difficult and problematic situation, has taken the necessary actions that one would reasonably expect the district to take in addressing the improvements that are necessary, in heightening its vigilance, and I think, as Mr. Gay said to me when I met with him, that this district is probably, at this current time, unfortunately not previously, but at the current time, among the most unlikely places that a similar fraud or embezzlement might occur in the future. That by itself is not compelling, but I think, again, that the grand jury report does very little to substantiate that beyond a kind of a knee-jerk reaction to dissolution of the district and transfer of its responsibilities, that the status of mosquito and vector control services would in fact be substantially improved by taking that action. Again, I will simply close by saying that, as I have already said, that I think much longer ago in the past, it was this city's experience, like it is many cities' experience, I would imagine currently, that there's not a outpouring of interest within the community to serve on the Mosquito District Board as your appointed representative. I continue to believe, and I believe it's the City Council's opinion, that we are indeed very fortunate that Mr. Rico has stepped forward, that he has served diligently, and frankly that he has accepted the responsibility that arguably is partly his for the situation that the Mosquito District experienced. Again, I think that the city is well served and that it has demonstrated, and that the district has demonstrated its accountability, its responsibility, and I think that we can enthusiastically say that your responsibilities are well carried out, your City Council's responsibilities in safeguarding the interests of San Bruno residents and those throughout our county in this functional area are in fact being well served by your time and attention to the appointment process, your assurance that you are represented on this board and that your representative is performing his functions in a responsible, thoughtful manner. So with that, you have in front of you tonight a detailed response to the grand jury. You're free, as always, to modify the draft information that's in front of you in any way that suits your interests. Your response, however, is due to the county by October 16th. So we do have a deadline that is coming up. With that, I'd be happy to take any questions.
Any questions of the city manager? Ken?
I don't have any questions. I guess the question would be if Mr. Riegel had any, comments as to, information that would we'd need to adjust or comment on, within. I just want to say that I agree totally with the response of the city. It seems a long time ago that I was appointed as the representative with the doom and gloom of West Nile virus coming upon us, and I got to know Mr. Gay. First and foremost, he is a true professional as far as vector control and the whole knowledge of this whole district. Unfortunately, he didn't anticipate that there'd be criminals, within his administration. So I don't agree at all as far as this whole reaction. And you say knee-jerk. I think they want to, the county or something wants to find a culprit, and give them a chance to, to get all this money so that they can hopefully do as good a job. But my concern is that we are lucky, or not lucky, but we are fortunate to have a very good volunteer representative that keeps us in tune. with what's going on, which is the most important part of the service, is the health and welfare of the community as it relates to mosquitoes and other critters. It's not about administration. I mean, are we supposed to always consider that anyone that takes on an administrative position in any organization is a potential criminal? So I think as long as those measures have been changed, as long as they are within better financial reporting practice, and as long as the board agrees on that and Mr. Gay is aware of what changes have to be done, I think the issue should be moot, and we should get on to the business of protecting the environment and protecting the communities. Thank you, Uncle Bob.
Thank you. Anyone else from the council?
Through the chair.
Michael?
I don't think I agree as wholeheartedly with what's in this report. I felt that the tone was a little too dismissive of the seriousness of what was reported. The grand jury didn't actually require our reaction or comments or an action on a lot of the things that were noted in the report. And I do agree with the fact that we have excellent representation in Mr. Riegel, but I was left with the feeling that San Bruno may be in the minority in terms of having adequate representation on the Board of Trustees. There are cities that don't have a representative. As the city manager mentioned, it's difficult to get people that are going to take the job seriously, and I don't know that anyone takes the job as seriously and as professionally as Mr. Riegel does. But I was left with the feeling that that is not, that we may be the exception and not the rule. There was a number of things that were noted in the report that made me feel that, perhaps all the issues have, although a lot of the financial problems that were identified, I believe 5 of the 8 that were identified by the consultant had been dealt with. One of the recommendations was that, there were several things that to me seemed more just bad judgment from somebody that, from the director, somebody that was put in that position. There was a comment there from the consultants that said that the director had program skills but lacked the fiscal skills necessary for overseeing financial operations, which is a big part of that job. Again, none of that was really addressed in the report. It's not something we were asked to comment on, but I would hate to really close the book on this whole thing and just say, yes, we're going to move on as is, without really doing anything to at least address my concerns about the people that are being put into these positions. I don't really understand how that director is appointed. There was something else that said that the district's policies were amended, and now it requires 90% of the trustees to remove the director, which to me seems uncommon and probably an unnecessarily high burden to have somebody removed from office. So that to me was a concern. Again, it wasn't addressed in our response, but these are things that I would like to see addressed before we say, okay, we're going to move on and we're going to close the book on this. Those are my comments.
Anyone else? Mr. Riegel, do you have something?
Just a couple of quick comments relating to Michael Salazar's statements. I'm sure Mr. Gay or myself or any of the other top people in the district would be more than willing to sit down and give you additional feedback to some of your questions. I did have the ability to look at the draft of City Manager Jackson's response, and I don't see that I would ask that any wording be changed. I think Connie and her staff did their due diligence and put together a very good response. I do think that San Bruno is probably among the few cities that are really going to take this sort of depth in replying. I think that's just San Bruno doesn't do a superficial job. So I'm open to sitting down with anyone from the council or any city staff, or getting Mr. Gay or the finance director to additionally sit down if you have any questions. The 90%, that number for removing the director had been in the policy and procedures that I'm currently the chairman of the committee on for a number of years. It was not something that was just put in. At least one trustee agrees with you that they think that may be too high. It has not been brought back to the full board yet to propose a number other than the 90%.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments or questions?
Through the chair, real quick, the 90% threshold is something that I also would agree is worth looking into. I think that is a high threshold to remove any director that serves. Also, just better secondary reviews when it comes to the accounting aspect, which is already addressed somewhat in the report, I think would help. And I'm not at this time in favor of having or recommending that the program be issued over to the county. In my opinion, I think for what the district is doing and what the actions speak louder than words, and obviously, as Councilman Ibarra said, there was this imminent threat. There was what was going to occur, and they have done a good due diligence. Unfortunately, there are some people that obviously gave it a black eye, and so I think that's healing, and I think that some of the comments that were made can be looked into a little bit on this, and those are my thoughts.
Okay. Anyone else?
Mr. Mayor, I just wanted to make a couple of quick comments. First of all, one of the key recommendations of the two recommendations that are directed to cities is that if the City Council is not able to locate a suitable representative to the Mosquito District Board, that the City Council it's recommended by the grand jury that the City Council would appoint one of themselves. And the draft material is in front of you. View that as a key initiative and a very good and strong recommendation with which staff is recommending that you agree. And in fact, you have a representative. He's been willing to serve. Presumably, he's willing to continue to serve. But should he not be available, you could, I don't want to suggest that this city couldn't be in the same situation that others are. It's not a plum job in many respects as volunteer assignments go. So it may be something that we could emphasize in the response. And just a quick response to Councilmember Salazar's comments. Honestly, we get into we sort of get into the mode of responding to the things that we're required to respond to, and that so the grand jury has a very specific. You have to respond to this, but I think your suggestion might be that we could take a step further, and to say in the cover letter, for example, that we believe that these. What I noted down was a couple of issues that you identified. One, concern about the 90% removal or the 90% vote requirement for removal of the manager, and secondly, maybe a strengthening of the program for what is the qualifications for the general manager, and how is a person for that position sought and evaluated. That is, I don't think the grand jury would mind if you gave them some additional suggestions. We would be happy to include that in the letter.
I would appreciate that. Thank you.
Okay, any other discussion? We're asking for approval of the response to the grand jury report, most likely with the suggestions of the city manager. Someone like to make that motion?
I'll make the motion with those changes, suggestions.
I'll second.
Motion is second on the question. All in favor?
Aye.
Carried.